In 1989, the Doctor and Ace walked off into uncertainty as Doctor Who was put on hiatus. 1990 began what is known as the Wilderness Years. The days became weeks, which turned into years, and not a Doctor nor a trusty companion in a TARDIS to be seen on television. There's a great documentary about it on the 2010 Special Edition DVD, which you can find as part of the first Revisitations box set. Come 1993, Doctor Who's 30th anniversary went through many ideas. At first an environmentalist film starring Tom Baker, and then a multi-Doctor story called Lost in the Dark Dimension, or The Dark Dimension, which revolved around a timeline where the Doctor never regenerated after falling from the big Pharos dish in the 1981 story Logopolis. The other actors weren't happy and the project fell through. If you look at the history of the attempts to bring Doctor Who back, you'll find that the BBC were only interested in it if Tom Baker was the lead. The anniversary would be marked with a two-part crossover with soap opera EastEnders called Dimensions in Time, written by former showrunner John Nathan Turner. It doesn't have a great reputation among the fans, nor even the actors who worked on it. It's Doctor Who's very own holiday special in that regard, and that it hasn't been shown since its broadcast. A better anniversary special comes in the form of the retrospective documentary 30 Years in the TARDIS, expanded for home video with a more than attached. For a comprehensive look at the making of the TV movie, I highly recommend Clever Dick Films' retrospectives on the programme and the features available on the special edition DVD. In a nutshell, Doctor Who would return to the screen in the year 1996, this time
in America.
But who would play him? Spoilers, it wouldn't be Tom Baker. Paul McGann was chosen out of a long list of actors to play the titular character, which included strong choices like Anthony Stewart Head, Ireland's own Liam Cunningham, future Dr. Peter Capaldi, and the late John Sessions. Comedy superstar Jim Carrey was offered the role but declined as he wasn't a fan of the show and knew his involvement would upset the fan base. For me, Paul McGann as the Doctor is one of the best elements of the TV movie and shows so much promise as the Time Lord. And although it is a shame that his life on television would be brief, to the point of McGann lamenting himself as the George Lazenby of Doctor Who, he would get his dues with the audio company Big Finish, who brought him back in 2001 and have been developing his character ever since. The other main cast of the TV movie include Daphne Ashbrook as Dr. Grace Holloway and Yi Ji Shou as Chang Li, who joins the Master. The way the Master convinces him is pretty ropey and doesn't sit right in the story for me. As for the Master, I still maintain that Eric Roberts is a great presence in any film and he played a delightfully devilish Salvatore Moroni in The Dark Knight, but I don't know if he was quite suited to the role. It's true that on paper the Master is a theatrical, nay, pantomime character, who was elevated in execution thanks to the efforts of the late Roger Delgado, but I think he's one of the weakest parts of the film. It's weird enough that they made him into a snake that expanded media is left to explain, but then they also have to reference Terminator 2 by having him go about dressed like he's cosplaying Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's very 90s, because it was the 90s. Much like McGann, Eric Roberts got another go at the character with Big Finish. I haven't listened to any, I confess, but I'm sure that they didn't do anything as daft as having him ectoplasm some security guards or deepen his voice in post-production and do a laughable wire jump at the end. The last person to mention as part of the notable faces in it is Sylvester Mccoy reprising his role as the Seventh Doctor, wearing a new costume and without his umbrella or ace. In later years, Sylvester said that he felt that the movie would have been better without him. I don't think his involvement was the reason it flopped, but I do think it wasn't a sensible creative decision to begin a new episode of Doctor Who, the first in almost a decade, with a regeneration. I know that the BBC didn't want him to be a part of the film as they associated him with the decline of the show. Opinion of McCoy during his era in the Wilderness Years is similar, I think, to how Jodie Whittaker's Doctor is seen by some fans both rational and toxic. Things are much different now. The TV movie, I feel, is a curate's egg of what Doctor Who is. The score by John Debney, Louis Furbay and John Sponsler is fantastic, and their new arrangement of the theme tune never fails to give goosebumps, and the TARDIS set is a gorgeous piece of design deserving of 20 seasons of a programme. But it's far too heavy on the lore. It feels less like a brave new beginning and more like a nostalgia binge. Remember the Eye of Harmony, remember Rassilon, remember how the Doctor's got 13 lives, remember how the Master used up all his and stole another person's body, remember the Daleks? We all do for sure, but I don't remember them sounding like they've inhaled a party shop's worth of helium, do you? I think one of the most disconcerting moments in the TV movie has to be the death of the Doctor. The film goes through lots of genres like science fiction and rom-com and even borrows the reversing time ending of Superman the movie. But when the Doctor gets gunned down by a gang in San Francisco, which is probably why the Irish Film Board initially gave this a 15s rating, it turns into an episode of VR. Incarnations of the Doctor normally die in a heroic or poignant death, or off screen because they sack the leading man, but Sylvester's Doctor dies on the operating table after Grace and the other hospital doctors get lost in one of his hearts. Not to sound like a member of the National Viewers and Listeners Association, but I think it's probably too real a death for the show, and feels very mean-spirited, like the kind of moment you'd see in a film or TV show that's clearly embarrassed by the silly or light-hearted parts of its history. Rather than accept and embrace it, they cut it out altogether or keep it in and use artistic license as an excuse to be cruel. Then he comes back as Paul McGann in messianic imagery while Canadian comedian and reboot Curly Howard Will Sasso watches on. My friend doesn't mind Paul McGann's dramatic "Who am I" moment, but I've always found it cringe. Ultimately, Doctor Who would be back for one night only. The Brits appreciate the movie, but it failed to interest the Americans, who were thrown in at the deep end to a then 33-year-old television show. The UK broadcast came a few days after the death of John Pertwee, who played the Doctor from 1970 to 1974, which I'm sure made the viewing of New Doctor Who a sombre experience for some fans. A dedication to Pertwee's memory was added on at the end and can be found as an Easter egg on the originally released DVD. There would be no second movie nor even a series for McGann's dashing optimist. I still believe that the scene where he discusses his father and life on Gallifrey is a standout, although new information makes me wonder if this is a genuine memory or a manufactured one. McGann would return in 2013 for the 50th anniversary prequel, The Night of the Doctor, and he remains the only Doctor whose broadcast stories, either on television or on the internet, show his birth and regeneration, one after the other. In spite of the amicable return to BBC One, not everything about the TV movie was well received. A lot of people don't like that the film made the Doctor half human. It's a leftover line from the original series outline, the Leakley Bible, detailed in full in Clever Dick's retrospective, but it didn't stick and has been easily retconned away by other writers, like the Doctor claiming he built the TARDIS in the chase, or the many occasions the character refers to himself as human. In the words of Robert Shearman, Doctor Who survives by the bumps. There's no point in trying to iron out the creases. It's a program that contradicts itself at every turn. Cinema Sin / Channel Awesome criticism is no good here, and is certainly a mindset and style I've moved away from after my initial misguided review in 2018. Having watched the program in full, and I'm aware it's probably a bad reference now, I wonder if a series of Doctor Who would have had a better chance if it came out the following year with the arrival of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. One issue I never considered before until discussing the film was that it lacked an important element of the show. The production team decided to relaunch the series without a monster. Although I like the character, the Master isn't a strong enough villain on his own, and I'm not the first to say that in reviewing Doctor Who. Granted, Universal probably had to write a check with loads of zeros just to get the Daleks catchphrase heard, but surely they could have found something else. And yeah, I know he's a weird T-1000 gooey snake yolk at the start, but that's it. I'm aware that an idea for Eric Roberts' Master was that the longer he possessed the paramedic Bruce, the more he'd begin to decay, but I don't think Eric wanted to be caked in makeup and claimed he had an allergic reaction to it. It's a pity, really, because I'd have loved to see what someone like Rob Botton, Rick Baker, or Greg Nicotero would have done with as memorable an image as an emaciated Master. It'd certainly be more interesting than Snake Eyes and pulling off a bit of skin on a little finger in front of a hospital receptionist, but that's just what I think. Eric looks well in the Time Lord costume, though. It wouldn't be out of place on the set of Star Wars The Phantom Menace. My review series may be called Good Who, Bad Who, but I don't think I'll ever be able to truly decide whether or not the TV movie is 100% good or bad. It has its merits, absolutely, but it ends on a very messy note. Loads of techno babble, and they lift the Doctor and Master fight from the deadly assassin, the one part of the serial that falls on its arse. But this time he gets swallowed up by the Eye of Harmony. The next time we see him, he'll look like Derek Jacobi. I am thankful that it does in a way future-proof any stories with McGann by having him go off on his own. His last line in particular feels very much in the spirit of the programme, a flicker of the Douglas Adams sense of humour. Although I'll never know what a McGann TV series would be like, as I don't live in that universe or timeline, I imagine it having a similar trope to the X-Files or Buffy, except instead of Monster of the Week, or perhaps alongside, we might have gone a Companion of the Week. Could have seen Daleks again, and hopefully not the too far gone spider Daleks that exist in the form of CGI tests. But again, that's all it might have been and not what we had. Like I said, Big Finish would be the ones to give Paul a fair crack of the whip. And to quote the Pizza Planet aliens from the Toy Story films, we are eternally grateful. The TV movie may have been a false start, and the years since would see received wisdom tell you that the show was outdated and never coming back, but wiser writers would look to this in the hopes of bringing it back to the television and reminding us all why this show is worth our time. So it's a mess, but an interesting one, and although people mightn't have seen it at the time, the story of Doctor Who was far from being all over. I originally gave this a 3.5 out of 10. I had one more and give this a 4.5 out of 10. Happy anniversary to Doctor Who the movie.